Hello, everybody. It's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to talk about a new game which was just announced the other day on Twitter by the folks over at Fury Software. Fury Software are the developers behind the Strategic Command series, and any of you who have followed my channel for any length of time will know that I've been playing quite a lot of Strategic Command World War II World at War, which is a grand strategy game that puts you in the shoes of either the Axis or the Allied powers during World War II in a turn-based strategy game. The combat resolutions are kind of similar to something like Panzer General, I guess, if that's sort of a loose way of thinking about it. But there's a lot of other elements such as research and development, there's politics, there's some manpower or unit caps based on unit types. There's a lot of depth to the game that isn't quite readily apparent when you first glance at the interface. With that being said, the folks over at Fury Software are developing a new game, which will be coming out, well, we don't know when yet. They just sort of tweeted about this yesterday. And this game is called Strategic Command World War I. So, Strategic Command returning to World War I. Now, this isn't the first time that these guys have ever looked at the Great War. In fact, some of the original classic Strategic Command games are still available, which look at World War I. So there's a classic Strategic Command World War I game, which is available on Matrix's website, which is a game that was originally released back in 2010, so almost a decade old. And it is, again, it's a member of the series that looks at World War I, but certainly dated. A bit of a time has passed between that game and presumably this new upcoming game. And I think that's, they redid World War II. So the first game that they redid in the more recent period of time, I think it happened like 6 years ago, and it was Strategic Command World War II War in Europe. And then they released Strategic Command World War II World at War, which instead of focusing on Europe, spread the game out to cover the entire globe. And now it looks like they're saying, all right, we've covered World War II in a lot of depth. Let's go ahead and let's cover World War I. And I think that's interesting for a few reasons. First, it'll be a new, fresh take on the Strategic Command genre, or game, if you will. Again, they're hearkening back to something that happened about 10 years ago, but plenty has changed in wargaming and PC gaming since then, I think, to warrant a reapproach. Additionally, there's some interesting things within the way they modeled World War II World at War that I think could make World War I uniquely interesting and perhaps even more well-suited to World War I. For example, you may remember from the European game or the World at War game that I've been playing a lot of, research and development is really important, and countries have to allocate resources to different types of research that they want to occur, whether it's spying and the ability to steal technologies from other countries, whether it's armored warfare, whether it's infantry combat, air combat, all these different types of technologies that you can spend money on to try and get a leg up over your opposition. And so obviously World War I has probably even more of that than World War II. When we think about World War II, the war started with tanks, and it ended with tanks. The war started with, monoplane, all-metal, high-performance fighters. And while they certainly got better throughout the war, it wasn't like you were developing brand new technologies there. Yes, jet fighters, but at the end of the day, I guess my point is that this was an arm of warfare that was being perfected at the start of the war and improved throughout. And so I think the way that World War II manages its research and development is pretty transferable in a World War II scenario, because essentially you just put money into a ticker to spend on a specific research area, and it just improves what you already have. Well, World War I may be a little bit different because a lot of the technologies that existed at the end of World War I didn't exist at the start of World War I. You're going to think about things like chemical warfare. You're going to think about things like aircraft, which kind of existed. I guess that's more of an improvement, but didn't really exist from like a combat perspective early in the war and rapidly developed into being a massive effort and a massive arm in the military. If you think about tanks, definitely didn't exist at the start of the war, but did play a role by the end of the war, although certainly still not advanced. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Additionally, there's this element of combat doctrine that evolves massively from the start of the war to the end of the war, and it'll be interesting to see how all of that is modeled and how that changes. Strategic Command typically takes things at a very high level. It doesn't delve too far into the minutia, but they may have to do a little bit more of that in the World War I game to really give the flavor of World War I. And if you read through like the description of the game itself, it does sound like this will be something that they do plan to tackle. So, for example, they're saying right up front that naval mines are going to be something that you can lay to protect your sea lanes or impede those of your opponents. So, in World War II, naval mines are sort of abstractly reflected by a couple of hexes where basically if you put a unit in, they're going to, hinder commercial traffic. And sort of from like a sea defense perspective, it's supposed to reflect like mined areas. But there's no active laying mines in the World War II game. But in the World War I game, it very specifically calls it out. Additionally, the game also references a use of unrestricted naval warfare, and that Germany's use of unrestricted, I'm assuming they're meaning submarine warfare, but it's saying Germany's use of unrestricted submarine warfare has been fully overhauled. Reconnaissance bombers will fill their historic role of spotting for the artillery. So, reconnaissance bombers, that's a new thing. Germany's naval warfare doctrine being overhauled could be a new thing. The write-up references the need to blockade your enemy. So presumably there might be something similar to the sea lanes mechanic or the convoy mechanic that exists in World War II for World War I, except maybe it'll be like the flow of food into the German nation, and if the British maybe don't deploy troops in the right area or forces in the right area, maybe the Germans get more supply. I'm not sure how that'll all work, but there'll have to be an element if they're talking about food supply and they're talking about blockades. There'll have to be an element probably of national morale or maybe decreasing effectiveness over time as long as the British blockade you or whatever. But these pose some interesting strategic not dilemmas, but some interesting strategic choices that the Allies will have to make when it comes to, blockading Germany and when it comes to Germany's strategy. Again, if there's this unrestricted submarine warfare portion, is it as simple as just putting your submarines on the sea lanes like it is in World War II, or is there something that's a little bit more complex? In terms of the game, it is apparently being fought on a 20-mile hex, so it's a hex-based game. Every hex will represent about 20 miles. It's obviously going to have all the historical combatants. It looks like, I really hope they don't hard code all of this because it would be interesting to have some variants, but they're saying that France, Italy, Russia, Serbia, the UK, and the US will be facing against Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire in our flagship campaign. I think one of my concerns or critiques with World War II was that you basically always had the same allied powers. And while that's largely realistic from like an American perspective or from a Russian perspective, you certainly could play a game that might cater to not getting either of those countries involved in the war. And, your diplomacy was kind of wasted against any of those countries in the game because you might delay their entry slightly, not substantially, but maybe slightly. But at the end of the day, they were always going to come in on one side or the other. That's probably fine for France, Russia, Serbia. But the UK should probably depend on how Germany acts early in the war. Do they invade Belgium? Are there other things they do that might get the UK involved? The US maybe shouldn't even come into the war if Germany doesn't wage its unrestricted submarine warfare. So if they're always slotted in as the Allies, I guess it's one thing to say they will only ever join the Allies. It's quite another to say that they're going to be facing off against Germany. So hopefully there's a ability to keep the US out of the war altogether. And Italy's another interesting case where they very clearly were leaning one way, but it's not impossible to imagine maybe things playing out differently. The game is apparently going to have campaigns for 1914, Call to Arms. I'm seeing this just now. They also have a 1914 campaign where Italy joins the Central Powers. So there you go, just kind of what I was talking about there. That could be interesting. And then there's a 1917 campaign which is called Fate of Nations, which I'm assuming is kind of focusing on the late war. So that'll all be interesting to see. They're also talking about, let's see here. Victory will will require developing new military doctrines to improve your commander's abilities, the combat effectiveness of your units, and even the ability to deploy new technologies like tank and fighter aircraft. So again, referencing the technological development that occurs throughout the war is going to be something that's going to be important for this game to model and hopefully capture the spirit of it at a grand strategy level. And it sounds like that's something they intend to do. They're also saying you can minimize the decision box to examine the map and assess the situation prior to responding to any decisions, and many decisions have additional notes providing their historical context and advice. That's pretty cool. I think one of the things that I've always really enjoyed with the strategic command games is the sheer number of events that pop up that you have to respond to. And I think they really doubled down on this in Strategic Command World War II, especially in the early war where you have to make some really important decisions. Do you end up splitting Poland with Russia if you're Germany? Do you end up annexing the Baltic countries if you're Russia? What do you do with raising various units, perhaps at full strength or at half strength if you want to give them a little bit more or less time? There's a bunch of different decisions that you make in the game that have a large impact on the way the game plays. And World War I has no shortage of those types of events. One example is I could imagine the Germans may get a decision on, do you want to send the Guben, the battle cruiser in the Mediterranean at the start of the war? Do you want to send her to the Ottoman Empire, or do you not want to do that? Will that have an influence on the Ottoman Empire's likelihood to join the Germans? For the Germans, maybe another, I don't know if this is an event, but a decision perhaps to either invade Belgium or not to invade Belgium, and what impact that might have. All really interesting opportunities to think about how World War I would fit into the Strategic Command system. It is also apparently going to, okay, so Fog of War, yes, that's to be assumed. There's apparently a dynamic movement ability, units that haven't used up all their action points to be deselected and reselected again later, making planning your moves so much easier. I don't quite understand what that means. Apparently there's a naval cruise element which allows you to move naval units swiftly over longer distances. That kind of already exists today in the way the naval cruises work in World War II. Naval units can only be reinforced in stages, preventing instant repair. Yep, that's pretty reflective of what they can do today as well. Let's see here. Friendly majors can be set to AI control, which is one of the cool things about Strategic Command in general, which allows you to basically turn off certain countries in your alliance and let the AI play as them. So that's an interesting piece. If I'm taking a look through here, it looks like there's different unit types which are going to be new to the game as well. Anzac, Mountain Corps, ground attack aircraft. Obviously, there apparently is going to be the option to get minor allies involved or opponents. It says many other countries will likely enter the war on either side, such as Belgium, Greece, Portugal, Romania, not forgetting, of course, the immense contributions of the British Empire to the Entente's war efforts. So there's obviously sort of this minor power element that you need to make sure that you've got, you're supporting your minor allies or, luring your minor allies into the war in the case of, Romania for Germany or what have you. This is an interesting little bit in the write-up. It says, undermine the enemy's will to resist through diplomacy and political intrigue while mobilizing your forces and developing new technologies and ways of waging war. So this implies that maybe there's an element of morale, which I don't think really... Well, morale is in Strategic Command World War II. There is a national morale component to it. So I shouldn't dismiss that, but I'm curious if maybe they'll make it a bigger part. Like if you blockade Germany for a certain amount of time, does it have national morale implications? Could that be the mechanic they use to simulate starvation? I don't know, but it'll be really interesting. Obviously, you've got things like the Russian Revolution, the Zimmerman Telegram, the Lawrence of Arabia, like all these different type of events that can occur throughout World War I. So all in all, I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but it's a title that I'm really looking forward to. I think it's exciting that they're developing, and we don't know a lot about it. We just know that it was, I think it was just announced. Again, the first thing I saw about it was on Twitter yesterday, and it does look like the first press release on their website is from June 3rd. So it does look like this is the first initial announcement of the game That might mean it still is a little ways off. I'm not sure. But I'm excited to see what comes of this. I just wanted to make you guys aware of this. Occasionally, from time to time, I do these, product announcement videos to let you guys know, to wish list, to favorite, to do whatever. There's a product page on Matrix's website for the game. I don't think it's on Steam yet, obviously. But just wanted to make you guys aware of this. So the newest Strategic Command game has been announced, and it is Strategic Command World War One, a remake of sort of the classic Strategic Command World War One, and obviously an enhanced product. So that's enough of my thoughts. That's enough of my musings, my ramblings. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts below. Is this a direction you're happy to see the series taking, or is this something that you have other thoughts on? So please go ahead and share and let me know your thoughts. Until next time, however, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying, oh, one other thing, actually. I think I'm really curious to see how this compares to Commander of the Great War. A couple of years ago, I did like a 40-plus episode series of a game called Commander of the Great War, which modeled World War I in a similar sort of hex-based way, and I think it did some really unique things around how much artillery ammunition you had to model the artillery, the artillery shell crisis, the manpower restrictions that you had, and so that you could actually really bleed yourself white. The Command series did a really good job, I think, of capturing some key things of World War I that I hope, it's not the kind of things that are traditionally a part of the Strategic Command games, but I really hope they see if they can absorb some of that. Because one of the things, it's useful to say like, oh, you can only raise 10 infantry armies, or oh, you can only raise 10 infantry corps, or you can only raise 5 armored divisions. But I think what the Commander of the Great War series did was it says that yes, you get all of that, but then you also have this finite manpower pool that you're drawing from, and as it goes down, your industrial production goes down. As it goes down, there are impacts to your national morale and other things like that. And so I would love to see them model something like that, because at the end of the day, World War I became a war about attrition. It became a war about seeing which country could outlast the other, and I think the way they did Commander of the Great War was certainly unique and something that I don't think I've seen a lot of other games do, and I think it was really well done for a game of its scope and scale. It's sort of a hex-based Panzer Corps type feel, but at a 30,000 foot level from a grand strategy game. They got a lot of simplification while also adding strategic depth, and really evoking the feel of World War I through some of their design choices. So we don't have enough information about Strategic Command World War I to know what direction they're going to go, but I hope they have that, because at the end of the day, Commander of the Great War is I think one of the best, or the best done World War I grand strategy games that I've ever seen, and it's a shame, because I mean it is a little bit long in the tooth. It might be 10 plus years old now, or it's certainly going on it, and I think it's a bit of a gem of a game. So if the Matrix and Slytherin group and Fury Software are going to be redoing a Strategic Command, it would be interesting to see what they can pull from Commander of the Great War as well, because that's another one of their games also. So, or at least strategic. It's not Fury Software's game, but it's one of Matrix and Slytherin's properties. But anyway, guys, that's enough of that. Again, all the previous asides, provide your thoughts, your hopes, your dreams, all that below. And without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and sign off here. So hope you guys all have a great day, and until next time, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.